Hey, hi, welcome everybody. We have a great panel tonight to talk about the book, Garden of Black Joy with Kino Evil, who put together the anthology. Okay, this is White Bear Center for the Arts. I'm Danielle Cezanne. I'm the gallery director here. This book, the cover is by Leslie Barlow, who is in the gallery right now with the emerging artist from Studio 400. And this is a panel discussion. And tonight we have Valerie Deas. She's a poet and a film curator and a radio show host. And she programs shorts for the Provincetown International Film Festival. We have Lisa Marie Brimmer, and she's an activist, performance artist, and a writer. She's also a co-editor at the Minnesota Historical Society for Queer Voices of Minnesota. So, and she's also presented on panels internationally in Austria and all over the United States. We have Lester Batiste. He's a savage writer in living color who is originally from Chicago, Illinois. He has 2 master's degrees, and we're lucky he lives in Minneapolis now, and he teaches in North Minneapolis. And then we have Kino Evil, and is that evil for evolution?
Evolve.
Evolve for evolution. I love that what you said on the back of the book about being a well, now of course, well, I have the book so I can look, but it was, he talked about being a scholar of insurgent possibilities, and I think that's what this book is about, is when he talks about being the fantastical, the dreams, surrealism. It's a marvelous book. And I was just wondering, Kino, how did you get all these talented people together?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for that. Thank you to the White Bear Center for the Arts for holding space for this conversation on Black Joy. It's a thrill to just be here with friends and comrades and people that you've been in community with. In my work, I'm grateful for, and I think a lot about in terms of like Black folks in the West, the idea of the smoke signal, the idea that you signal out to your people as a practice of letting letting them know where you are, and as a way to make contact. So really, we just put the call out. Black Table Arts put the call out for the month of April for Poetry Month. And in 30 days, we got 388 contributions from around the world, thinking about how can I write a poem on this term, joy? How can I zoom in on the details of my life and give an accurate account of what this feeling is? And that produced a wide range of topics that it was just an honor and a gift to just read through so many PDFs about Black joy in the South, in the Caribbean, in Ghana, in Kenya, in London. So it really was a labor of love. Absolutely. And thank you to these phenomenal writers and poets who are joining me here for this conversation. And for folks who are watching the webinar, what's gonna happen is we're just gonna have a brief panel discussion where I'm just gonna throw out some questions and then have a poetry reading. And the folks here are just gonna read a few poems. And again, it's just a blessing to be able to hold the space with you all. So with that, is this a good point to just kind of dive into the thing? For sure. So yeah. So we are in quite a moment in Minnesota, in this country. You know, I feel like even in the last 24 hours, each 24 hours, there could be like a panel discussion on things to, you know, to talk about. And I guess first, I would love to just for us to sort of think out loud as a collective on the term Black joy, and to think about time. So the book came out in February of this year. So even from February to now, it's been a journey. It's been some journeys. It's been a few journeys. And I guess what I want us to hear is, why do we stick to this term Black joy? You know, what is it about this sort of term that even in spite of the events of even the last 24 hours, you know, Derek Chauvin getting released out on a non-cash bail. We could talk, you know, we could think about Breonna Taylor. You know, we could think about the National Guard in Minneapolis. I would just love for us to think out loud a bit. Why do we revisit this term Black joy? Why not Black happiness or Black self-interest or Black, whatever other thing you could substitute for Black joy? Why, what welcomes us to that term? And I just want to sort of offer that as the first question. What welcomes us to the term Black joy? And if anyone sort of has any thoughts or any thinking around that, you know, if it's, you know, the songs that we revisit, or, you know, the movies or relationships, just any sort of thinking on why do we return to this term Black joy, you know, in this Minneapolis, Twin Cities, Minnesota moment that we're in. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I think me personally, I keep returning to Black joy because I feel as if it is natural, right? For me, we kind of live in a world that's built on binaries, right? And I feel as if for the darkness and like chaos that's kind of going on right now, for me, the Black joy is the refuge that with all the just craziness happening, right? And so for me, Black joy is a necessity to kind of respond and to keep my spirits high, especially when the world, it continues to kind of, you know, not validate myself, right? Or other folks with melanin. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. 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 Refuge.
I want to piggyback on that idea. Like, joy is such a, like, it's like bubbling, right? It's like it's not the sort of thing that I think people even, I don't even think about it. You know what I mean? Like it just happens. Like I can't help but to, and I think it has to do with that, just like you said, that idea of binary. It's like there's no other response to all of this. Like, I mean, I could cry, but what else? That doesn't make any sense, because it's just also, it feels so bananas. Like, it's just like, well, you know what? what am I supposed to do? I'm gonna write myself a little song. I'm gonna like dance a little dance in my living room, and like, you know, whether it be like you're about to lose your job, whether it be like whatever it may be, like I'm gonna find some sort of joy in the situation, because it's like, I mean, I don't understand. I can't naturally just get into the oh no, like it's just not something that naturally happens. Like I have those moments, but then my response to that is just like, you know what? Like I can't. It's like, all right, well,
right.
And I find something that makes me laugh, and I move on and find something that makes me feel like I'm still the person that, because it's like, you know who you are, I know who I am, what's happening in the world. I always think of it as like has been happening in the world, has before I was ever born, before all of us. This has been going on. So it's like I could either let it kill me, which is this is not what I'm trying to do, or I can try to continue to just, it's like I'm gotta keep being me, wear my little lipstick and be cute and do whatever I gotta do and just find the joy where I can find it, or else it's I mean, it's like, you know, they win in a way. It's like I can't do that. That doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like it's necessity. I feel like it's survival. And I also feel like it is like it flavors things, right? Like, you know, you talk about a silver lining, or you talk about or I guess like I think, and maybe I'm imagining in some of my poems this way, like I think about the way light works and how like, you know, it's not everything's always well lit, you know, but it's still there. And so for me, that's kind of how I think about the Black joy, the Black joy, the Black joy, but how I think about it in terms of memory too, you know, like even with painful memories, I think in a lot of ways, 2020 is a painful memory. Look, I'm actually ready for it to be a painful memory. Ugh, what a tiring year. But I think about, yeah, like you're saying, you were starting the conversation and thinking about time. And like, when I go back, I think I'm interested in the joy of thinking of the book launch and the joy that we had of being together and not being afraid of each other in the same way we are now. Just like physical proximity, what joy is that? And I think about, yeah, like that communal space, that ability to hold space with one another is something that is and has been very complicated in this city throughout the last 8 months. So it's yeah, I think it's about memory, but it's also about space. Like, yeah, getting together in the garden, like you have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate that. And I've, you know, in my own thinking, have been thinking about, you know, what Lester mentioned around refuge, but also about sustainability. And what do we do if it is the case that the refuges that the refuges that we find joy in aren't sustainable? And then I've been thinking about, if that is the case, just how do we deal with the either like anxiety or wonderings around where do we go? What are the songs? What are the ways in which we find, if not sustainability, comfort or joy, or, you know, does that make sense? Like what's our thinking around finding our calm if it is the case that the places that we find our refuge aren't sustainable?
So I'm going to hop right back in and then I'll send it back off. But I just feel I'm really resonating with what you're asking, Kino. And I'm thinking about the first thing that popped up in my mind when you said, what happens when you find that the things that bring you joy are not sustainable? I'm like, oh, my 20s. That's what I'm thinking is, oh, that's what that looked like. That was not a sustainable time. But there was a lot of joy in my 20s. Right. And there was also other colors in that time. Right. There were also other things that were happening in that time. So I think about that, the medicine of that. And then the second part of your question was about sustainability. And as a person, actually, in the midst of a challenging work transition and this big sense of like communal loss, and personal loss, I think, or personal, I don't know if it's loss, but difference, like whatever this journey is that I'm on, this is not what I would set out for, right? Yeah. It makes me feel, I'm kind of in a place where I don't think anything is sustainable. And I don't know that that's about being negative or pessimistic, but I'm just like, I don't know if sustainability is real. I know that's not the best part to start the conversation. So if somebody's got the case for sustainability, I'm ears for you.
Right. No, I mean, I totally agree, and that's why I've been thinking about it. But what does that look like? I don't know. So like, what does that look like from like? I guess the question, the next question, I guess, is like, then how do we organize or get together around that knowledge? You know.
So I feel you, but to kind of flip it on the opposite side, right? I don't know, I'm going to speak about the sustainability, right? Just because you kind of pose it as that, Lisa, right? I think things that give us joy are sustainable, but I think it kind of creates a naivety, right? To kind of use a super highly academic term, right, from the homie W.E.B. Du Bois, right? We start to kind of live with a veil or perhaps live without a veil, like our perception is a little bit distorted, right? And the only reason I kind of say that, right, is for the simple cliche, ignorance is bliss, right? How so many people in this world perhaps live with a preconceived notion of quote unquote what is normal, right? Well, at the end of the day, like there's no such thing as normal, and to a certain extent, I feel you that there's no such thing as sustainability, but I think that certain individuals trick themselves or fool themselves into thinking that certain things are sustainable, i.e., like white supremacy, right? That's kind of where I was thinking, especially with that idea, right? I think that, especially kind of living in this moment, kind of returning back to the first question, I feel as if we're at a pivotal time where we need to either reckon with the idea of white supremacy tied to the history within our country, or we're going to continue to like live ignorantly bliss, right? Those folks who are going to continue to live ignorantly bliss and just remain silent, right? So I don't know. That's just my thinking in terms of accepting the challenge of being the devil's advocate for sustainability. Valerie, I'm not sure if you have anything else to like kind of add to the mix or whatever. I don't know.
Wow. I'm like thinking about it. I mean, sustainability for me, it brought up this sort of idea of like, I agree. Like, I don't think that the things that give us joy necessarily are always sustainable, but I think that the things that give us joy change. I think that those are the things that sort of evolve. And so I mean, like when I think about my 20s, I'm like, yeah, there were lots of things that sustained me and that were able to like, you know, give me a lot of joy. Those things don't give me joy anymore. Like I've moved on and now I have different things. And then I'm assuming as I continue this journey of getting older in different stages of life, like you'll find different things that continue to still bring you joy in some sort of way. But I think it also has to do with like, you have to be a person who is vulnerable. And you have to be a person who's willing to be vulnerable and open. I've been struggling with that just with my own writing and trying to like get into that place of like real vulnerability and really being open and reading books and crying and all that good stuff. And it's not something that it's like a muscle. You have to work it. You have to exercise it. It's not something that you just, oh, I have this, I'm done. Like you really have to continuously, and it's hard, right? And I think that's partly why a lot of people go into the sleep and are like, yeah, it's easier just to be asleep and not have to think about it instead of being like a fully functioning, present human being. For me, there's no other way. Like, why am I here if I can't do that? Like, if I'm not willing to do that, like that's part of that's part of the journey. That's part of the hard part. But that's also the part of the exciting part. It's like, oh God, this is so hard. It's like, but it's also just so delicious to me. Like I am excited about being, not necessarily hurt, but just feeling, you know, like being open to feel and being open to pain and being open to, because when you're open to pain, you're open to joy. Like you have to be open to be able to get that. And if you're not willing to do that, then it's sort of like, all right, well, you know, dig up your hole and just lay in your grave already. Hurry up. Like,
Word.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? Any other things?
I just have to say, Valerie, I've written down like 4 things that you've said so far.
Yeah, I'm still thinking about it.
I'll Venmo you later for the wisdom here.
Okay, no problem.
I'm so proud.
It's a thing I'm working on. Like, it's a thing I'm processing myself. So it's like, it's something I've been like writing about and thinking about. And I'm just like, it's so hard. You know, it's like you're in this, especially now, like there's so many things. You got like white supremacists driving down the street. You've got like, you know, National Guards, you've got fires, there's so many things that are happening. That it's like your natural impulse is to like, okay, where's my turtle shell? I want to put it over my head. I want to just, you know, like, you know, buckle in and just like ride this out. Like I'm terrified. But it's also like, well, what kind of life is that? Like, am I living?
I moved this summer, and at a certain point I realized I had to stop living out of my go bag, you know? And like, I'm not speaking in metaphors, y'all. I had a go bag and I was living out of it for a little bit longer than
so do I. And you're like, and it's like, and I think about like my parents coming here from Haiti, and I'm like, and I think about like the Haitian Revolution, and I think about like all these different things in history. I'm like, is this what my ancestors felt like? Like,
Yep.
this is terrifying. Like,
No,
is this
so
what
now it's
it
older
feels
than-
like?
Yeah.
I was just
Yeah.
like, I'm like, you're like trying to like start a new country, and you gotta fight like slave masters, and you're doing all this stuff, and you got a hat on, and you got an outfit, and you got like a bayonet, and I'm like, and the world is on fire, and you're like, holy shit! Like, sorry, children, but it's like it's intense, you know, and you're like, I can't. So it's like, okay, I have to still hold on to the person that Valerie is. Like, I am a vulnerable person. I'm an open person. I'm in for this ride. So I need to like actually really be in this and just pay attention to what it is and like do what I can in it. Really, it's heavy. Yeah, talk to my therapist a lot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Valerie, I love that you brought up writing. One, obviously because we're all poets, but also I'm interested in the thoughts that we might have on the use of beautiful things, right? But not only like beautiful things, but like vividly beautiful things, right? So it is true that there are tanks outside, right? It is true that the National Guard might be in Minnesota, and it's true. All of these things are true. My apartment, overlooks the Hiawatha train station, Midtown, and then you could see like the ruins of like Target and literally the burned down police station. And I'm just curious in terms of our writing, the place of beautiful things, and are we writing about things that are beautiful, particularly outside, or are we not? And just our thinking around what's driving the images in our writing. And I'm just curious, does beauty have a place when in the new work or in the work that is in the collection? And just the thoughts that we might have on the role of beautiful things in this 2020 Minneapolis Twin Cities moment.
For me, beautiful things have been like, it's like reimagining. So I'm trying to like reimagine what life can look like the way that I want it to look like. So it's like having that imagination of trying to world build and create new spaces and create new paradigms and new belief systems. So that's part of what I think I sometimes have in my work, and that's what I've been using or having more in my work lately. It's like, all right, well, this is all crazy. What will this look like? Like, what will I have? What will this be? What can this be? Because I think a lot of people get stuck in this, like, well, this is what it is, and we're just gonna have to live with it. And I'm like, no, that's ridiculous. Like, there's been too much human history of like different types of things that we can have that we can differently do better than this. Like, this is garbage. So for me, it's imagining a new way of being in the world, and that's for me exciting. And also, like, when you think about like all the stuff that's been happening with like, buildings and the burning and it's like you see all the artwork that pops up everywhere, right? And it's like that was the part that was really exciting for me. Like, it's like you go outside and it's like there's a point where you're like, okay, I can go outside now. And then you see all these murals and you see all the artwork and you see all the creativity and you're like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. Like, people are like there's that beauty still there. Like, people are, it's not like, I don't know, like, I don't know what I expected or what I thought it would look like, but it was just sort of so inspiring to see community get together and be tender and beautiful together. It was lovely. I loved it. I was just like, oh, look at this. This is so beautiful. So yeah, I don't even know if I answered that question. Sorry.
No, it's all good. I thought that was great.
To piggyback with what Valerie said, I completely agree, right? I think that, after George Floyd was murdered by the police, I actually revisited William Faulkner's Dry September, which is a short story about the leading up to a lynching of a Black man in Mississippi, right? So it's not the actual act of the lynching, but it's kind of the taking place, the mindset, the mind frame of the white man getting all up in arms, right? Because they believe that this African-American man has raped this white woman, right? And there's a line in that particular short story that, I don't know, for me, I thought just was captivating and described both the tragedy of George Floyd's murder, but also the art, the energy, and the power that was located in the city, right? And the line is, life caught in its terrible and beautiful mutations, right? So for me, it's really much more like the beauty for me in my work is, and this comes from the tragedy, or at least in this moment that has happened, just because there's been, like Valerie said, so much good organizing, so much good energy, right? And I think for me, I have to bear witness and capture that, right? Especially since, you know, news outlets are just saying crazy stuff and just, you know, completely inscribing situations, events, and people in not correct ways, or frankly, like not nice ways, right? So that's kind of where the beauty comes in my work, just, you know, bearing witness and just seeing the terrible things, but the beauty that's born out of that.
Think about when I think about the beautiful things, and I guess how it shows up in my work is like I have to really push myself to remember that there were beautiful things, you know, and it helps me to think of them as things. I guess it helps me to place them as images, and I don't know if I don't know, in this moment, I feel like we kind of see that in that there has to be so much intention around a lot of things that are happening, you know, like that art going up, it's not, you know, random, it's like intentional, right? People are really choosing to do that kind of stuff and make those experiences for other people. And then I think one way that beautiful things show up for me is definitely in nature. And I think I've had a lot of profound experiences in nature already this year, and it's not over. And I think I'm kind of starting to get to some of my favorite times outside is when it's a little less crowded. Like the cold, you know, Minnesota keeps the riffraff away, right? That's what they say. People that can't handle the cold, they can't hang up here. And there's a lot of things you have to be able to hang to be able to, you know, hang with, to be able to like chill up here. But yeah, I think about, just the ways that flowers show up in the spring, but then also like the berries of the fall and the winter months, like, and the evergreens, like they're so, they really hold us. Like we have a really magical place that we live here on Dakota land. And so I think that really shows up for a lot of beauty for me.
Right. Yeah, you know, I really appreciate you saying that piece about nature. And I'm thinking about what, you know, Lester said around bearing witness. And I think that, of course, you know, we have this whole blessed tradition about the artist, the Black artist, as like, you know, verse journalism, the fly on the wall, you know, Gwendolyn Brooks, in her work Report from Part 1. But I'm also interested in what if some of our poems don't bear witness, perhaps, to the state? Or what if we don't bear witness about flowers is only about a lot like lilacs? Or what if the poem about, you know, the wind or winter is only about winter and our experience in it?
People don't like that. You're not going to get that published, Kino. No one's going to publish that.
But I like that though. Like I think that should also exist, and I feel as if sometimes it's kind of, you know, talking about the world of poetry, right? If we're going to talk about it as a genre, I feel as if there's too many people who think that poetry is supposed to be super esoteric or super abstract. Like, though, there needs to be space for those poems to exist, because for me, I feel like those poems kind of are like the gateway poems for some people who never were into poetry, right? They seen or heard a poem about a flower like the purple lilac, and, you know, it entices them to read more poetry because their favorite flower was a purple lilac, right? And so, you know, I think...
And purple lilacs deserve poems too. I mean,
exactly, right?
Yeah, I mean,
I fully agree.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't think it always has to be something so like, and then there's this covert message that's about, because I mean, I feel like when we spend a lot of time, like, you know, I feel like when we spend too much time just bearing witness, it's like, well, I want to bear witness on my life. Like, I want to talk about, like, who's bearing witness on me? Like, I'm living this fat life. I want everybody to know about it. But it's like I feel like we often are in the position of like, I have to witness what's going on in the world and I have to like document it. But I'm also like, people want to know about what little Haitian girls doing in Minnesota. I think that's a cool story. I want to read it. I mean, so it's like, I think it's important to also have that reflection on our own, and not necessarily always in so, I mean, it's going to be like, you know, what you're doing in the, you know, in the greater environment. And so that reflection is going to come in, but it's also just sort of like, you know, these TV shows that you see now where it's like, okay, the main character is a little Black girl and it's just about her story and just about like what's going on in her regular life. And it's not necessarily about her struggling through some sort of thing or trying to overcome some other thing. It's like, well, she's just having a regular old life. And some, yeah, and that happens on top of all those other things, but regular stuff is happening too. So
That's real.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah. And I love what you brought up, Lisa, and thinking about do we negotiate in terms of writing and what will be published? And are those things that we think about, and how are we thinking about those things? You know, particularly in like the grant economy, and the like fellowship economy, and you know, the requests or the gigs that might be framed around terror, right? And you know, in knowing that that's real, like, you know, particularly in the foundation landscape, right? You know, being artists that, you know, folks want to know about what are our thoughts around, you know, living in Minneapolis and like George Floyd. And so, and it isn't to say, and I asked this question without seeking an answer to it. It isn't to say, yes, you know, we should, you know, go for, you know, these things, but just what are our thoughts around it? How do we think about what we produce and what we go after and needing to pay rent, and what are some things that we sort of think about when we're living in this way, right? I mean, I think a lot about grace. I think a lot about I don't know. What's the word I'm looking for? Grace. Maybe it's breath. Letting. I don't know. But yeah, what are some of our thoughts around that? Any other sort of thoughts, like?
Well, this has been the busiest summer I've ever had. Like, everybody wants to know what I think about everything all of a sudden. Like, nobody cared before. All of my friends are real busy. They're writing all these articles, and I'm like, yeah, it's been intense. Like, so how do you feel about this, Valerie? What's going on in Minneapolis? How are you? Where's this happening? And I'm like, who are you? Like, I've been sitting here. Like, nobody cared before. So it's been an interesting time. So because part of me sort of feels like, oh, this is pertinent and important, but then part of me also feels like this is draining and exhausting, like, because I'm living in it, like right now in present moment. So it's like it's hard for me to sort of like process while it's happening. Like I could probably write about it in a year if I have some space in my brain, but like right now I'm just surviving. Like I can't. So that's hard. And as for like writing what is published or what will be published, I'm like, if I do that, then no, actually I don't even know if I could do it. I just write what I want to write. So I don't know what. I don't get any grants. Nobody wants to give me money for anything. So I'm like, I write what feels like makes sense to me and what's speaking to me in that moment. And I'm like, if somebody likes it, cool. And if they don't like it, cool. I just keep writing. But yeah, I never know what, I always think like, this poem will be great, people will love it, and then people read it and they're like, nah, and I'm like, all right, well. And then the one I don't like, people love, so I'm like, all right, I don't know, I don't have the finger on the pulse of that at all.
Right. Any other sort of thoughts? Yeah, totally. I think a lot about, you know, reframing the goal sometimes, or maybe it's reframing the activity, you know, maybe it's just like, you know, being in right relationship with, you know, the earth and your people. And, you know, when I think about a garden of Black joy, I think about that. Being in right relationship with your people and being in right relationship with the natural world around you. And also knowing that, you know, the constraints that we find ourselves under, like rent, are real. But I don't know. I think people get surprised by Black joy. I think we get surprised by Black joy, you know. And I think a lot about the sort of way it shows up is that it's spontaneous, right? Which might get to what we were talking about before in terms of unsustainability. I think that things that are often unsustainable are spontaneous and surprise, and they pop up one area and then they pop up, you know, in different areas. Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I've been thinking about too is, like, of course, self-care, right? Particularly as we are sort of bombarded with like loads of information. And I guess I'm wondering, how much information or research do we do, or do we do research when it comes to our poetry? What kind of information do we take in before we write a poem? Is that something we consider, you know? Just any thoughts around, you know, our writing processes as it pertains to the information that we seek out or don't seek out. You know,
I can speak to that, in that this last year has been, you know, I set a goal, and it kind of touches on the last question too. Like, I set a goal of completing a manuscript, and I've been writing poems for years and years and performing them a lot. I would consider myself more of a performance poet almost than a page poet, but I don't know if that's true. I don't know what that means anymore. I think that's always been broken language. But in terms of like this last year, I've done a lot of excavating, and it's in my poems, it shows up in that I have I think I've achieved like a newer level of vulnerability. I don't know if it's deeper or not, but I know that it's new. And I think that only by spending time with more of my memory and like my pains and trauma, like getting into my field, like getting into my deep stuff, that I think it makes, I'm making different connections than I was before, in terms of like, why am I drawn to certain types of like, why am I drawn to the natural world, for instance, or why am I drawn to like herbs, like the use of different herbal medicines and in my poems, right? Like, why do I feel like cinnamon needs to be in this poem, for instance? Because I have I have a deep relationship now with cinnamon that I didn't have before, right? And so, like, for me, journeying through herbalism and different types of ancestral veneration has been really impactful on my work. It's, like I said, I feel like it's opened up different places that I didn't have access to before. So I feel like studying is really important for me. It helps fill my brain with new language, right? And think about language differently, because, you know, learning all these Latinate words for different things, and then learning all of these more like just like colloquial folksy things that people call things, right? Like mullein versus lamb's ear versus whatever I don't even know what the Latinate word would be, but, you know, there's different kinds of words to describe the same thing. So I don't know, that's what interests me.
Absolutely.
I was just about to say, for me, research kind of, I do it just to kind of stretch myself and kind of, exactly what Lisa said, gain new vocabulary, kind of new ways to describe things, right? Yeah, I would agree with everything they said. They hit it right on the head.
Yeah, it
Absolutely.
depends on the project for me and what I'm, because it's like sometimes I write something and it kind of writes itself. Like I don't really, I'm like, all right, something is happening. I just write these words down and I look at it later. But then sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm working on something specific and I definitely will do research for it. But with Lisa, like I'm connected much more to like, my mom passed about 4 years ago. And so since she's passed, I've sort of spent a lot more time looking at my ancestry, thinking about my heritage and sort of like doing research and that sort of thing. And so I've been much more connected to it than I think ever really been. Maybe like the last time I was disconnected to it, I was little. And it's interesting the things that like when someone passes, the things that you remember that you didn't ever remember before at any other point in your life. You're like, I remember we did something like this when I was 4. I remember I did this thing when I was little. And so it's like, so it's, for me, it's been sort of like a rediscovery of things that I knew, but then forgot. And so I'm re-remembering. And that's where the research comes in for me. And I'm just like, did I really know this? Like, so you're calling up uncles and then I'm looking things up and I'm like, how did I know this though? It's like, when did I know this? I don't know. But so for me, it's been great. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I love that you said that. Like when did I know this? And I think that gets to a question in the chat that somebody asked. A teacher brought up, you know, when was the first time we like encountered Black joy, and thinking about how do we come into knowledge of this feeling or this term, right? So when I think about that question, I don't think about actually the term Black joy. I think about the relations that were around me when I was young. I think about my siblings. And it for me, it seems more so that an experience or a set of relations that were close to me brought out joy, but I didn't know the term. I didn't know the words. I wasn't thinking about whatever I was doing at the time, whether it was like, you know, playing in the yard, or I don't know, dancing, you know. But yeah, so yeah, just to hear your thoughts. You know, when did we know, or when did we experience, or when did we come to terms with Black joy for the first time?
I have a specific
either
memory.
in our poetry or just
like I have a weird childhood memory that I'm the person in my family that remembers things from, like, I remember when I was 3 years old and I was teething. Like, I remember crazy things. And my mother would always be like, how do you remember this? And I'm like, I don't know. But when I was little, I remember singing I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor. And I was 4 years old and I was singing it. I heard it playing on the radio and I was singing it to myself, not realizing that my parents were watching me. And I turned around at some point and they were just kind of watching me, and they were like talking to each other, like, how does she know all the words of this song? Like, she's 4 years old. Like, how does she know this? And I'm singing it. And like, I didn't stop. Like, I wasn't embarrassed. I just kept singing it and just sort of like being really performative and excited. And I was like proud of myself. Like, I felt that I was like, I'm so proud of myself. I sang this song and they were proud of me. Like, I could see it on their faces. That they kind of laughed and they were like, look at her. What did we make? Like, what is it? What is this thing here? Like, and it was just such a, I remember that feeling, like today I feel it. Like, I remember that feeling of like just pride in myself and like pride in like my parents' pride in me, and just sort of like feeling so, just feeling myself. Like, I was just like, yes, I know these words. I'm 4 years old. I know these words. Like, it was just, so like, that's, I always think of that moment. I'm just like, that was Black joy for me, 4 years old.
For me, it was also just being surrounded by my parents, right? And, you know, just being influenced by them, as well as just, you know, inculcated by them, right? They kind of taught me what it was to have those happy moments, right? Specifically, I remember when my dad would pick me up from school and we would roll around in his 1972 Cadillac Eldorado. That thing was baby blue with white wall tires, and he would just be blasting like just old school 8-tracks, right? And I was like, what the hell is an 8-track, right? But for me, it was those moments that I shared with my parents that, I don't know, just instilled and gave me that joy, right? It gave me a tangible example to strive for the rest of my life, right? And, you know, try to replicate with my little homies who I'm raising right now.
For me, I think I get it now. Like, I think I understand Black joy now, but I'm like this moody adoptee, so I didn't really think that I grew up with it as much as I learned it in adulthood.
Thanks.
Kino's like, I know that you're gonna bring the like Daria level realness about your life, but you know, but just to name, right? Like, and I have complicated opinions about adoption, which is a complicated situation. So this isn't me out here for anybody, but saying my experience. I think that I learned the first time I heard the term Black joy was Helena Sullivan Jansen using it to describe what she was not going to do, which is not going to read a poem about Black joy. She was going to read a poem about Black grief. And mentioning that in a Gibbons cohort conversation where she was sharing some of her work that is deeply personal and does talk about, you know, grieving the loss of a child. And I think about, you know, as an adoptee that, you know, you kind of grow up away from certain things, and you do grow up away from, for me, I grew up away from a sense of Black identity that that had joy in it, that had room for joy in it, right? And I grew up not far from Kenosha, Wisconsin, right? Where we have seen a lot of, I mean, there's a lot more information and light being shown on areas of the world that nobody has given two poops about for quite some time. So it is a very new era where we are entering in terms of the Black Midwestern experience, I think, and in terms of specifically this upper, like this Great North area that we live, the Great Lakes region, outside of Detroit, folks talking about anywhere outside of Detroit, right? Folks talking about anywhere outside of Chicago. So I think about that a lot when I think about, you know, Black joy and coming to learn Black joy in adulthood. And almost like looking maybe at Black joy as a rite of passage could be a way of thinking about Black joy. Yeah, those are things that I think when you ask me that question, Kino.
Absolutely. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. And I've just been thinking, like, and then I think it would be great if we dove into some of our poems, is that what if it is the case that we don't know what Black joy means, you know, but we might have frameworks for thinking about what it means to us, or what it brings out, or what it allows us to experience, right? And there's a section in the book, right, that joy isn't always joyful, right? Which, you know, might bring in a framework of like, well, you know, if it's not happiness, it's not always joyful, how is it the case that there are poems about things that are heavy in this anthology, you know? And coming to, like, you know, maybe a sort of realization that there's sort of like that we're still trying to figure out what it means. You know, we're in an activity where we're thinking through how to describe a term that could have so many sort of experiences attached to it, you know. And I think that too is a joy, but you know, and to do it in relationship with other folks and with other people, as we hear other poems. So with all of that, is there anyone who would like to kick us off as we transition into sharing some?
Kino, before we start, there was one more question. Yeah. I'm not sure we got to in the Q&A.
Oh, yeah. So I'm not sure I saw that. Yeah.
It's all good. So the question was, can each speaker comment on how they express the opposing forces how they represent emotions. I think of art as a way to touch emotions.
Mm. Is it oppose the forces?
No, so can each speaker comment on how they express the opposing forces? So I guess
Oh,
the
express the
idea,
opposing force.
yeah, express the opposing forces, how they represent emotions. I think of art as a way to touch emotions, and that was a statement, not a question. And the question is under the Q&A section in the chat.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess yeah. So for me, I really try to zero in on nature. But what does that have to do with opposing forces? I think that, yeah. So when thinking about poetry, it's interesting that I think that when you zero in and say when you write about, I don't know, like the way a bird lands on a branch or the way a flower opens up, and you're also thinking, because you have to, about your own survival, you'll find that there are ways that you end up describing your situation in ways that also have something to say about the natural world. And I'm not sure that there are sort of protocols to follow, but I think that there are, literary devices and techniques that we could talk about. But I think that when you find your muse, that, or like beauty, nature, love, and then because you have to also, because you care, are invested in your own survival, are in solidarity with other oppressed groups. What also comes up are interesting, fun ways to be in conversation with the world that you want to create, and you find that your imagination serves you to also think about, well, who are the birds' cousins and what do they have to say about, whatever. And you have fun with it, if that sort of answers the question a little bit. Yeah.
For me, I
Did
try to represent emotions. Oh, sorry, Kino, were you done?
no,
For me, I try to represent emotions using and trying to kind of represent senses in my poems, right? Touch, taste, smell, kind of hearing, etc. I think that that's a way that I try to kind of connect to the readers, just because we all, to a certain extent, have some of our senses, right? So I try to really tap into that. In terms of expressing the opposing forces in a particular poem, for me, I guess I will harken back to the literary techniques that Kino started to talk about in his response. And I would suggest reading Lucille Clifton's My Dream About Being White, right? Because in that particular poem, it features a fantastic literary device of using the opposite to talk about the subject matter, right? So in that poem, Lucille Clifton's My Dream About Being White, the poet and the speaker literally verbalizes their dream if they were in a white body, right? They physically describe what a white body looks like, etc. Through the description of the white body, the reader can infer what perhaps the black body looks like, right? And I think that it's through the indirect address that is a really good literary device if you're trying to, express opposing forces, right? That's kind of how I would answer that question.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts?
I guess I don't know. I don't know how I do any of those things. And I'm and but so I'm excited to hear if other people do. I guess sometimes I think guess what I mean by that is I think some things are really conscious in our writing and sometimes things aren't. I think sometimes they happen. So
for me, I think that Kino, I want to piggyback on your comment about like nature, because I think of like nature there's so much tension in nature, right? Like, so there those opposing forces are kind of there. Like there's the you know, there's the sort of like serene, beautiful day, and then there's like a storm, there's like a hurricane, there's like, you know, a tsunami, a flood, whatever it may be. Like there's sort of like that that balance in a way. So I feel like, I mean, I don't necessarily write a lot about nature. Nature is in my work, but I don't always see it right away. And I think it's also one of those things. It's like, you don't always see what you do, right? You just sort of do it, and then you're like, oh, that's what I was doing. But I think that, at least for me, when I don't know, I'm like, when I think about tension, I think that, or like opposing forces, I don't know if I necessarily do that. I think that the opposing forces for me tends to be what the world wants from me and what I want to do. So I'm the force, or I'm in the tension, sort of. So it's like the world wants this, but Valerie wants that, or the world wants this and the speaker wants that. So it's always this sort of like, and it's never really the same thing. It's never, the world always wants something crappy and the speaker wants joy in some sort of way. So that's how I think when I come across it in my work.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and I think perhaps we can dive into the reading section and just share, you know, whatever we're feeling moved to share, you know, could be in the book, could be things that we've written since February. And we could go in order, we could popcorn. Is there anyone on the call who has something on the tip of their tongue or in their heart that they would like to kick us off with? And you could read one poem, two poems, and then we could just go through. If either one of you wants to kick us off. Whoever wants to.
I can go for it. I got you, Keon.
Awesome.
So the first poem that I will read is actually from a collection, which I have right in my hand. All right, feel free to go get that thing if you have not. It's pretty fire. And the poem that I have featured here is called Fuller Park Pool Days at 331 West 45th Street. Night runs with one of the slickest, hippest, and most supercilious out there. Minx stoops, often wearing white with gilt-rimmed glasses and tooth. Stoops rolls round 47th Street in his marshmallow nimbus, brush waves in the back from Murray's hold. Gold chain dangling, red bone wrangling, clouded teeth whose voice is raspy deep, like Billy D. He lived on 47th Street, across the way from Fuller Park. Night would always stop in to see his friend, since Minx's garage was a place for a light or a spark, before the pool, locker room, or concrete cool. Shining and whining because of the summertime heat. Trees lean in to watch raisins dried up in the sun become revitalized shades of Concord grapes with a splash of water. During beat season, Glocks sneeze when squeezed and light the block like fireflies in the breeze. On my knees, not to pray or to get spanked, but rather to receive instruction from night runner's shoulder motion. As I stare at oak limbs kicking waves rippling chlorine and clear. Near me stands my little big sister, above the water, but below the mahogany chief's headdress of towels and jet magazines. In the shallows, night signals her to jump. In the deep, there are big kids, umber like me, dunking, jumping, and bumping cheerfully as the chief whistles, blares warnings at them. Outside the gate, a south side pulsates and peeps. In the shallows, night roars, come on, little mama, you got to learn how to swim. In my tearful eyes, I know this is happiness.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yes, yes. Anyone else want to pick it up? Valerie.
I can read a poem.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
Valerie, you want to go?
Yes, I'll do it. I had a couple poems I wanted to read. Can I read a couple? Okay. All right.
You're fine.
I've written a couple in the last couple of months. So I'm going to read the one from the book and two others. Okay. Strategies. Your picture from the park made me blush, transforming me from dusk to tobacco. In one sip, one word in, I knew we were holding each other somewhere in the blue. In this revolution, I think you have my mother's hair. Roller waves back to the Black future with a defiant bounce. I sit and thank you with my hand, in a way both real and imagined. You're the type of alchemy that works on me. Ask me again about sleep when your face is a grainy shadow of shivering gray dots. In the middle of the night, are you waiting for something? This is called Sleeping Waking. All right. Sleeping, waking, and dreaming about that muggy apartment with the windows facing a nowhere block, where Mondays kicked off with Coltrane's My Favorite Things and ended with Monk's Haitian fight song. The gust from the ceiling fan recreating a mini jet stream above the bed. Our bodies dim in the morning hours are close enough for communion. We are a puddle of soft, flesh seasoned by sweat. Hello, stranger, I love you. This is my favorite version of ourselves, effortless and unfolding before the day is done with us. And this is another piece that is not finished. I'm still working on it.
Come here, girl.
I'm gonna read it. Thank you. I'm just gonna read it. Okay. In mid-July, a sunlit companion is almost an apparition, a ghost of smooth black, a moonlit island wrapping around my soaring body, floating in a found night. In mid-July, a timid howl of libido has an instinctual charm. It unbraids my marrow and limbs, fills a blushing mouth, and trains my blood to satisfy my vital parts. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. That was fun. It was fun to read for people. I haven't read that at all, so it's okay.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Good. It's so good to hear you read. So good to hear all y'all read. It's good to hear people reading.
Right?
Mhm.
It's so nice. I'm like, community.
Yeah, it's good to remember. I'm going to read a couple poems. The first poem is called Black Warrior Poem. And given we've mentioned some conditions here in Minneapolis, this poem I wrote shortly after Mr. George Floyd's murder. And it was published in Shay Cage's A Moment of Silence anthology. So it was published this summer. Slightly different version. It was newer and rougher then. It's still pretty new and rough. So Black Warrior Poem. The thick smoke is a gull's call. White, gray, black, come to know this bitter earth. Taste the black pepper, black powder, inherent pop, go on go, fresh water, spirit, carry a fortress, float a jagged leaf, a current, pass a mother's heart, pass flowers. If you can't give anymore, try to be natural, go abstract, envision the storm. We can be new, already a sunflower with arms ready. We can be giant, warm petals open.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Are you
I was
just
just
in
gonna
one
do one
poem?
more. Or can you want to read a poem?
Oh, absolutely. Totally
Is that
fine.
cool? We
Totally
got time
fine.
for one more?
Absolutely. Yeah, I
Okay,
just
no,
wasn't
that's
sure.
cool.
Totally
It's
fine.
just Zoom makes everything awkward, and then I try to make it more awkward.
it's,
So I'm
it's,
sorry.
it's all good.
Um,
It's
this
all
is a new poem. It's called Crystal Lake, and this isn't in the book, but I think it's kind of, it maybe knows or is friends with my Summer Thoughts poem that's in the book. And yeah, this is a good book to pick up. Crystal Lake. Always paddling towards the open port. Hindsight is a true levee, squared, the jaw, the jar, the pipeline, the spill, the bend, the slight. One eye on the urgent horizon. She opened my vessels creek-wide, cells seeking supreme adjustment, reconciled, healing each other, splayed knees, punch after punch, first concussion, a bruise, a mouth, she tasting like oak, strong and dirty, fractures of light. Was I a king or a modern convenience? I lied. Was I a king or a modern experience? That first light, that crack of almost blue, lying littered about broken teeth, sacred breath, crisp fractions of my clipped bark. Nobody sings anymore. I wanted a gentle interment. I got it. I developed hot, flickering hands that open, and I stay braced for flight. Someone pencil in my weak mustache. Stranger, bind my banquet fruits. One adhesive finger tongues the ripple, and my gums. The past tense of sing is not singed. Thank you.
Mm, thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. And thank you all again. To you all, phenomenal poets. It's really just a joy to participate in this activity of talking about language, and beauty and imagination, and possibility. I have a really short poem to share. The title for now is On What Matters. Yeah. Referring to the earth, I mean a sibling, which is to say, silver blades of grass, of which little hands touched when we were younger, which is to point to a street. Who on the other side calls my name? The earth or a boy? Across, meet me here, so we can continue to play and live as children do. Black boys in the earth, both here until they aren't, both slightly away from the sun. Thank you all again for gardening this digital space that we find ourselves in, and participating in a conversation on our writing and our people. It really was a gift and a joy to sit in this space with you all. Thank you to Danielle and White Bear Center for the Arts for inviting us to share this space. Is there, oh, and then I have to say thank you to Wise Inc. Absolutely, that published the book. I have to say thank you to In Black Inc. that collaborated with us to get the word out. I have to say thank you to Button Poetry that collaborated with us to receive so many submissions. So I have to shout them out. Is there anything else as we sort of close out here, Danielle, that you want to mention?
No, it's just, I just have never forgotten that poem that you read a couple years ago at the Art Center about the rain, and then there was mud puddles and there were people in the puddles. Do you remember that? It's so beautiful. I
Oh,
thought
thank you.
I'll never
Thank you.
read again.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. To be honest, I'm not sure where that poem went. But I appreciate you naming that reflection. I'll try to find it, and then if I can find it, I'll send it.
It would be great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
It's really been just such a gift to have you here and here in Zoom land, I guess. And thank you to our sponsors for making it possible. I have to thank everybody, our premier sponsors, our platinum sponsors, our new studio architecture, and Schweeder's Construction Incorporated, Schweeder's Pottery, Real Manufacturing, and Emergency Contractors Services Incorporated. And our gold sponsors are Steve Goranson Video, Boyum and Berenshire, Mueller Memorial, and the Pillars of White Bear Lake. And this activity is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a Minnesota State Arts Board operating grant, thanks to the legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, and in part by the Manitou Fund. So
Thank you so much.
thank you so much. And you know, I hope your introductions were all right. I know when we started off and it's not like when you're live and you can kind of read people. And usually I get off the stage too and just enjoy your conversation. So is there anything else that you'd like to say before we go?
I think that's great. Folks can buy the book on our website, blacktablearts.com. Please follow these poets on social media. They're great. They are really are writing and putting out work are in communities, and it's a thrill to be able to share space with them in this anthology, and to share space with them in community. So thank you all again. Appreciate you all showing up.
It's really a gift to hear you.
I have one thing to say. There seems to be a question in the chat that I just happened to notice, and I don't know if anybody can answer that really quickly as we leave.
I wasn't able to see questions coming in. I'm not sure.
I just happened to see that. I was like, oh, wait.
Yeah, what's the question?
Do you ever concern yourself that you may not represent all Black people, but are interested in your own authenticity in your writing? That's the question. Yes. Yeah. I know that I can't represent everybody. I could only be Mallory.
Yeah, I mean, ditto. Yeah, and yeah, I think that, I'm just gonna say the same thing. And I think that, you know, Black folks, we share, you know, and I think that that sharing is different than someone who's, you know, not Black, assuming that, you know, the same thoughts apply to like a monolith as opposed to, you know, just being Black and like sharing your day-to-day experiences. I don't know. That might have been an over intellectualized answer.
I mean, you know, we're a spectrum. Yeah, there's all over the place. There's a whole bunch of different ways. All different ways. Yep. In all different ways. Yeah.
I completely agree with you all. In my work, I definitely, at least after kind of this moment, especially after reading Ibram X. Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist and like Stamped and all that good stuff, I've definitely have taken a step back and tried to truly not perpetuate racist ideas, especially against like Black and brown people, right? And I think that's definitely been something that I've been struggling with, at least coming to grips with my racist ideas and the things that I've been inculcated with, especially in this country right? But, you know, that's kind of the main thing I try to do. I know Blackness isn't like, there's not one way to be Black, but I try not to perpetuate stupid stereotypes that, you know, denigrate us.
Yeah, I can't like let my ideas of what Blackness is also like flavor my opinion of other people's Blackness, right? Like I can't be judging on other people's Blackness either.
Yeah, exactly.
And my best self.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and I always sort of like to name drop like a few like sort of resources for Black folks and folks in community doing great work. And you know, I think that like you know celebrate and uplift Blackness. You know, and so like I'm thinking about like you know, of course we know like you know the number of theaters, and we know the work that Shay Cage is doing, the work you know Free Black Dirt, we know you know multiple sort of collectives in this Twin Cities that are currently putting out you know smoke signals and spaces for folks to gather. You know, I mean, I'm thinking about like, you know, queer voices and that beautiful anthology too. So there's spaces and, you know, work to check out. But thank you all again.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's a thrill to be here. I will, yeah, I look forward to sharing space with you all in White Bear Center for the Arts, hopefully in the future. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. Peace.
Peace.